Hi, my name is Mark from Canny Gaming, and this is the first video in a comprehensive tutorial series for War in Spain 1936 to 39, a new theatre level operational war game that covers the Spanish Civil War in an unprecedented depth, a conflict that served as the grim testing ground for the tactics and technology of World War II. And this new game is the testing ground for a new series of games to be developed by the team that made the legendary War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. This means you can expect that same level of hyper detail, modelling everything down to individual squads, vehicles and guns. The game is available exclusively from Matrix Games from 22nd of January 2026. This title is not yet available on Steam, so you'll want to head over to the Matrix website to secure your copy. In this series, we are going to play through the Balearics Tutorial Scenario. Because this game is so deep, we've broken this guide into several parts. Today, in part 1, we are focusing on the UI navigation and some basic concepts in the game, and we will start to examine the strategic situation for an invasion of Ibiza and understand the ground forces we have available. By the end of this video, we will have a basic invasion plan ready for the first turn, and we'll be ready to turn our attention to the naval operations in part 2. The full background of the Spanish Civil War, with detailed discussions regarding its causes and progression, are available in many comprehensive books and videos online. However, it is important to note that by July 1936, as the attempted coup d'etat staged by 3 senior generals faltered, the country stood deeply divided. The mainland was split, with approximately 60% remaining Republican and 40% falling under nationalist control. While the nationalists controlled large rural swathes of the north, they had captured only a few major cities, most notably Sevilla and Cordoba in the south and Zaragoza in the north. The Republican government maintained firm control over the capital, Madrid, as well as Barcelona and the vital Basque mining regions around Bilbao. The Balearic Islands reflected the broader national schism. Menorca remained resolutely loyal to the Republican government, but Mallorca and Ibiza quickly aligned with the nationalists, providing a crucial base for naval and aerial attacks against the Mediterranean coast, presenting a constant threat to Republican supply lines. The rebel leadership faced immediate crises. One of their leaders was killed in a plane crash during bad weather, while General Franco remained trapped in Spanish Morocco. Furthermore, the plan for the Spanish Navy to ferry the Army of North Africa to the mainland failed when the fleet remained largely loyal. In several instances, sailors staged mutinies to arrest officers who attempted to join the coup. Our first action on the main menu is to select the faction controlled by the computer. This is an important distinction. For this tutorial scenario, we will be playing as the Republicans. Therefore, we must click the button for the Nationalist AI. Once that is set, we simply click Start New Game. While there are various other scenarios available, including a grand campaign that allows you to lead either the Nationalists or the Republicans through the entire war from July 1936, we are focusing on the Balearics tutorial. This specific scenario begins in early August and is confined to a limited portion of the map. Once the scenario is selected, the game displays a historical overview. I will not read it aloud now. Pause the video if you want to read it. I will refer back to key details as we progress. For now, let us simply click Start the Game. This is the main game interface. We have a menu bar along the top of the screen with various buttons to access different information about the game as a whole, and a bar along the bottom with information about the currently selected hex. A jump map. the LCU list and the map area. I'll cover these in a little more detail as we go along. We have the LCU list open by default on the screen. We can use the minimize button to hide it. We don't need to cover this yet. This is a hex-based game and these are quite small at this zoom level. Each hex covers 5 nautical miles. This is because 1 nautical mile per hour is called 1 knot, and knots are the typical way of measuring the speed of ships. Nautical miles are used on both sea and land. You will often just hear me say miles. For everyone who is not very familiar with this unit of measurement, it's about 8 kilometers. The hexes are not big in real life terms, but there is a huge volume of them on the map, far more than many comparable war games we've seen up to now. We can zoom in and out using the scroll wheel on our mouse, or using the page down or page up hotkeys. We can also scroll around the screen. The game allows scrolling by positioning the mouse at the edge of the screen. I will use just the keys. Remember, in this game that means using the up, down, left and right arrow keys. We cannot scroll using WASD as those are hotkeys allocated to other functions. Here on zoom level 0, I have limited ability to scroll the map. We can see on the jump map that there is a yellow square showing the area we are currently viewing, plus there is a red square, that is the area of the scenario. We are limited strictly to that red area. At zoom level 0, we cover nearly the entire map available in this scenario, making it a very useful strategic overview. Now, before we go further, I'm going to go to zoom level 2 and then zoom level 4. Now, on the jump map, the yellow box covers a much smaller area. You might want to set your preferences to zoom in further to level 8, but I don't personally see a good reason for that. This is Ibiza, one of our targets to be captured. The naming is a little confusing because it is both the name of a town and the name of an island. On the map, the black text is the name of the island and the white text is the name of the town. The name is also given on the hex bar at the bottom and if we hover the mouse over the flag in the hex. I'm going to set Ibiza town as a preset map location. I have a keyboard with a numeric keypad which I will use for this. I'm going to use the Control 1 key combination to set the number 1 key to Ibiza town. Now, if I use the jump map to move away, I can just hit the number 1 key to go straight back to Ibiza centered on the screen. These flags on the island are nationalist flags. There are 12 hexes on this fairly small island, but only 4 flags. The hexes with flags are bases. The nationalists control this island and the scenario wants us to capture it. That is our first challenge. Just to the south is the island of Formentera, also held by the nationalists. In the full campaign you might want to capture it, but it has no real usefulness in this tutorial, so we will ignore it. At zoom level 4 the hexes look much bigger, though they are still the same 5 miles. I'm going to hit the hotkey G for golf to turn off the hex grid. It's a toggle. The selected hex is always clearly outlined, and to be brutally honest, the grid lines are ugly and interfere with the text. If I'm ever in doubt, I can just toggle them back on. This game has an unusual approach to coastal hexes. If I highlight this text next to Ibiza town, most of it is obviously sea, but the game deals with this properly. Both land combat units and naval task forces can occupy this same hex simultaneously, unlike most games that force a hex to be land only or sea only. Here we can have both. Even on a small island, there is room for some manoeuvre warfare. If you occupy the centre of the island, there are 6 hexes around you. You could easily be outflanked. By using the hotkey S for Sierra, we can see the hex side travel types. Green borders can be crossed by land units only. Blue borders are for naval task forces and white borders allow both. you might notice a red border on Formentera. That means no one can cross it. The combination of the hotkey G for grids and S for travel types will resolve any questions you have about movement. Ibiza has two types of roads. Light yellow indicates secondary roads. These are faster than cross-country, but are made of mud and affected by weather. The grey roads are asphalt main roads and are good in all weathers. If you occupy the middle of the island, you only block one road. Enemy forces could still move around you to the north quite quickly. The map terrain is quite clear. The island looks fairly flat with woods. The hex bar at the bottom identifies this area as plains, meaning open countryside. We can also use the hotkey D for Delta to see terrain descriptions on the map. You'll see P for plains, RGH for rough, and 4 special grey hexes with an L for light urban. These light urban hexes are towns and they all contain bases. Bases usually have manpower, industry and resources. From a movement standpoint, urban hexes are treated as having secondary roads, but any enemy force inside one will receive significant defensive bonuses. Let's toggle the descriptions off. You can see the artwork difference now. The rough hexes look less flat. Generally, combat will follow the roads toward the bases, especially the cities. If you go off-road, standard wargame rules apply. Infantry are better in rough or forest, while armour excels on the plains or cultivated farmland. When we hover over the nationalist flag in Ibiza town, we get a tooltip. It shows the range, which is 0 right now because I have Ibiza selected, and the weather, which is clear. The DL detection level is 0, meaning we have no real intelligence on this hex yet. The victory point value is over 2,000 for both sides, which is quite high and provides a strong incentive to capture it. The scenario instructions explicitly state that the Republican player has to conquer Ibiza and Palma in 1 month, recommending the use of Valencia's troops with Menorca's forces as auxiliaries. Finally, the tooltip shows Ibiza has a level 2 civilian port and a level 1 airfield. There is a green box in the hex with a question mark, meaning we can't see the exact assault value of the defenders. Green is the colour of the enemy, while red is used for friendly forces. The bottom hex bar shows 2 units. One is an engineering support unit, likely a naval HQ, and the other is an infantry unit with an S, probably a garrison company. Apart from the defenders in Ibiza town, there are 3 other bases which appear to be undefended: Sant Antoni, Cala de Sant Vicent, and Santa Eulalia. My suggestion is to land at Santa Eulalia, as it has a level 1 port where we can unload supplies. Let's refer back to the information in the scenario text. This gives us our roadmap. We aren't just wandering around the Balearics. We have a strict deadline to secure both major islands. Our immediate priority, as the text suggests, is coordinating the forces from Valencia. Let's scroll out from Ibiza back to zoom level 0. If you know where Valencia is on this map, you might be able to spot the city name. It's here, but let's assume we don't know where it is. Let's go back to being zoomed in on Ibiza, and of course that means we can't see Valencia on the map. If we go to the top menu bar, we have a button with a flag on it. We already know the flags on the map represent bases, and the tooltip for this button says Show Bases. We now have a fairly long list of bases. Let's reverse the alphabetical order in that list, scroll down and find Valencia. Now we can just click on it and we are taken directly to Valencia on the map. Now that we've found Valentia, we know this is a place we're going to come back to. Let's lock its location to the numeric keypad. This time I'm going to use Control 4. Then at any time I can get back to Valentia just using the hotkey number 4. Valentia is a major city. We can see how the developers have drawn the graphics for a city on the map. The buildings are not just in a single hex, but in several hexes around it. Looking at the bottom hex bar, we see the terrain is heavy urban. So Valentia is more developed than Ibiza. Let's enable the terrain descriptions with hotkey D for Delta. There are 3 dark grey hexes with the letter H for heavy urban, and some light urban hexes sprawl out around them. You can imagine the heavy street fighting involved in capturing a city like this. But movement is good even before we notice the road network, with main roads going north, south and west. We also see railway lines here, whereas there were none on Ibiza. Like the roads, there are 2 types. Minor railways have the cross marks more spread out, and these are slower. Then we have major railways with the cross marks close together. They are faster. Now, if you notice, there are 2 bases that start with the word Valentia. Valentia is the name of the hex in the middle of the city. There is also Valentia Puerto on the coast. In reality, where the scenario refers to Valentia, it means this hex. Valentia Puerto is a level 4 military port. It has ships here and some troops. We only have 2 units here, but as these are our own units, we can hover over the icon on the bottom hex bar to see information. We can click on the icon to see details and give this unit orders. This is Valentia Naval Base Services. It consists of naval support, some aviation and airfield support. But it is the naval support that is important here. The tooltip for the base at Valentia Puerto shows that it is a level 4 port. Valentia is a military port. This is not explicit. It has to be implied because there is no letter C on the bottom hex bar to show it is civilian. We need these naval engineers to rearm any warships that are based in the military port. This is a new element to the game. The fact that we have ports which are civilian and ports which are military. There can be quite large ports on the map that have no capability to support our warships. Subs are fine as they can be resupplied anywhere. However, for surface warships, we need this specific type of military port. We will develop this point as we explain our strategy for naval operations in part 2 of the series. The larger the port, the better, but we must have naval support units present. Fortunately, this has already been set up for us in 1936. We have inherited the Naval Base Services unit that was already here in Valentia. We really cannot go wrong with it. The hex bar icon and the unit window show that this is a static unit. This means we cannot move it, and that restriction applies throughout the entire scenario. It is worth noting that some units in the game are only temporarily static, while others will always remain fixed in place. Our other land combat unit in Valentia is the No. 1 Company of Militia. Note that both of these units have Spanish names following the historical order of battle from the war. If you struggle with these, there is a section in the manual telling you what all the Spanish names mean. We see in the name that it is designated as a company. It also has the NATO symbol for a company with a single mark. 2 marks would be a battalion and 3 marks a regiment. It does not have many men, just 182, and is fairly poorly equipped. This is critical to notice. The scenario instructions tell us we should invade Ibiza and use the troops at Valentia to do it. However, this unit cannot be used to carry out an operation like that. It will get wiped out very quickly by the nationalist forces. As you get used to the types of units, their manpower and their equipment, remember the new feature that units have assault values to see their relative strengths. There is a total assault value in Valencia Puerto of 11, but most of that is in the Naval Support Unit. We cannot load that support unit onto ships and send it to invade Ibiza. The militia company has an assault value of just 2. We would be hoping to field units with a total of 20 times that to invade Ibiza. The map shows us the main city hex of Valencia has just 3 assault value. These are the Theatre HQ, a military hospital and a railway regiment. These are used to move supplies by railway. We are not going to be using them in this scenario. In the hex to the north there is an aviation base unit to provide aviation support to an airfield in the hex. There is a large level 5 airfield there and we have the support for it. But we have no planes in Valencia in this scenario. So in and around Valencia there are 6 land combat units, but only 1 is infantry, and that is incredibly weak. The game starts in 1936 with the attempted coup. The rebel army units in Valencia have been defeated and probably arrested, or they fled. We are having to build a new army from scratch here, and most of the units we need are not yet available to us. What we need to do is use the overview report for the nation on the top menu bar. This gives us buttons to view a lot more information about Republic and Spain. There are 3 buttons which are going to be very important: ship availability, air group reinforcement schedule, and LCU reinforcement schedule. We want the LCUs, the land combat units. And here we see a long list of units that will come on the map in the next 33 days before the end of the scenario. We can arrange this by location name rather than estimated time of arrival, and say that 8 units will arrive at Valencia or Valencia Puerto. Fortunately, some of these are due to arrive very soon in 4 days. I am going to plan our assault on Ibiza to probably be launched on 9th of August, and in the meantime the single infantry unit we have in Valencia will wait. But let's just go back to that unit. It has a button here for unit organization. This is a new button for this game. Nearly all units are components of a bigger unit, and these components can be joined together into a single combat force or separated as you require. Here we see that the number 1 company is part of the Urabari militia column. Urabari in this particular unit is the name of the person who commanded the unit. Only 1 of the 8 components of the militia column are green and on the map. The others are red and arrive later. 2 of these will arrive very late in the scenario on 30th of August. So we are expecting shortly 3 components at Valencia and 1 at Castellón. Let's do the same routine as before if we are unfamiliar with where to find Castellón. It's here just up the coast from Valencia. So we need to remember to move that component down to Valencia once it appears on the map on the 6th of August. Going from Castellón to Valencia is 7 hexes. The hex of Castellón is selected and we hover over Valencia and confirm a range of 7 hexes. So that is about 35 miles. We can estimate a daily movement of a militia company of about 15 miles or 3 hexes in friendly territory. So this could take us about 3 days to march these troops from Castellón to Valencia. They might not arrive until the 9th of August. Let's look at Menorca. I know Mahon is the main city on the island of Menorca. That's here. But to help me get back to it quickly in the future, let's also set a hotkey for this location. I am going to use Ctrl and 3 on the numeric keypad, and next time I can use the hotkey of 3 to get there. Note first that all the flags on Menorca are Republican. We control this island. Notice that Mahon has a much higher assault value in the red box below the flag. We can hover over the red box, or we can use the icons on the bottom hex bar. For the first time, we see what seems like a lot of forces on the map, 11 units. But do not get too excited. We have 8 of those 11 with the icon showing they are locked. They cannot move. Several are not really combat units anyway. Specifically, we have a military hospital, a naval command HQ, and a naval bases services unit. Mahon is also a military port and has the naval support it needs. Then we have 3 units which include in their name the letters CD for Charlie Delta. These are coastal defence units. They are static units and cannot move. They include emplaced batteries of artillery. There are several more of these around Minorca, and as we will see in a later part of the series, around Mallorca as well. So that leaves us with just 4 units, and 2 more of these are static. Let's go to them first. We have a company of zapadores. These are engineers, and they are proper combat engineers. They are definitely worth considering. They have an assault value of 3, but these units can help us deal with fortifications. However, they are unable to move. Unlike the coastal defence units, this is only temporary. They are frozen and become available later. The window shows these can move in 10 days. There are basically 5 types of units we encounter. First, support units like HQs, base services and hospitals. Second, combat units which are permanently static. We cannot use these in this scenario where we want to attack, but we can encounter enemy forces which are static. Third, combat units which are temporarily static and will become available during this scenario. We can think of these at this stage as undergoing some sort of training before we use them. Fourth, combat units that are not yet on the map, which will become available later. We can think of these as currently being recruited. Fifth, and finally, there are the combat units available to us at the start of the scenario. It is possible in War in Spain that you can have units which are available to you and then get removed from the map. This represents various historical changes that occurred. It is not an issue in this short scenario. We also have in Mahon the rather grandly titled Karl Marx Battalion. They are not a battalion, whatever they call themselves. They are a company, but of professional infantry, not militia. How can we tell this? Here in the centre, we say that the unit is composed of infantry squadrons, not militia. They should have light and heavy machine guns and some mortars. With an assault value of 9 currently, they are the most powerful unit we have seen. It is a low bar, but this is an important unit. They are static, but will become available to us in 8 days, which is on the 14th of August. Note, they are currently disrupted and fatigued, so they are not at full assault value. They were involved in fighting against Franco's attempted coup. Those 8 days will allow them to partly recover. We have a decision to make about these. If we click on the unit organisation, we see they are part of a column called the Karl Marx Column of Militia. They are professional soldiers, but they have been grouped under this unit, mainly composed of militiamen. Notice that the company of zapadores we already looked at are also part of this column and are likewise static for the next 10 days. While much of that unit is already on the map, they are not at Mahon nor Valencia. 2 components are in Barcelona and the other is at Girona, with other components arriving at Barcelona later. We have 3 options here. First, we can ignore these 2 components at Mahon for our invasion of Ibiza and have them join the rest of the Karl Marx column in an invasion of Mallorca. We will be looking at the invasion plans for Mallorca in part 4 of this series. Second, we can keep them separate from the rest of the column and have them join the invasion of Ibiza in 8 days. Third, we can have the entire Karl Marx column assigned to the invasion of Ibiza. This would mean shipping units from Barcelona. Time is of the essence. We already recognised we cannot possibly invade Ibiza on day 1, and we have planned for an invasion to be launched from Valencia on the 9th of August. Do we want to delay this until the whole Karl Marx column becomes available? This is probably the biggest strategic decision we need to make. How much force should we assign to the invasion? Note, the last component of the column is the number 2 mortar battery that will arrive at Barbastro on the 14th of August. Let's look at Barbastro. It is here on the mainland and far inland. It is 23 hexes from Barcelona, and this is a distance that could take 8 to 10 days. We would be looking at the 21st or 22nd of August to launch the ships. And such a march can result in some fatigue when they arrive at Barcelona and could require 2 to 3 days of rest mode to recover combat readiness. If we wait that long, we might not have enough time to capture Ibiza before the end of the scenario. You can make that decision in your own game. I will not say now what I intend to do to avoid any spoilers, but it is clear this is not merely a simple tutorial where we move a couple of units for an easy victory. We have units arriving at various locations around the map and dates that we must track carefully. Let's press 3 and go back to Mahon. We have 2 further units there which are not static. The first is another Zapadores unit, engineers, but these are Zapadores de Puentes, bridging engineers rather than combat engineers. However, they have an assault value of 2 and some usefulness in battle, even if we do not need their bridging capability on this particular mission. And then we have the Mahon mixed group of artillery. This is a great unit. It has an assault value of 7 and features a long-range artillery function. This is a new feature. Artillery units can fire on enemy units that are not in the same hex if they have guns with sufficient range. This group includes some 105mm guns with a range of 9 KYDS. This is a measurement of distance that is used extensively in naval warfare. KYDS stands for kilojards. Kilojards means thousands of yards, so this gun has a range of 9,000 yards. Now, if you belong to the 80% of the world using the metric system, you might be asking what that actually means. A nautical mile is 2,025 1/3 yards. Yes, the imperial measurement system can be a nightmare, but for our purposes, a nautical mile is almost exactly 2,000 yards. I'm going to treat it as if that is exactly the case, as it makes everything much easier. Since we have 5 nautical miles in a hex, that equals 10,000 yards. The 9,000 yards range of a 105mm gun is 4.5 nautical miles and is therefore less than 1 full hex. Consequently, 105mm guns cannot fire into the next hex. However, we also have 150mm guns in this unit. They have a range of 14,000 yards. That is 7 nautical miles and therefore more than 1 hex. So the artillery group does have the ability to fire into an adjoining hex. The interface confirms this for us, so thankfully we do not have to do the maths every time. There is a new button for LR, Long Range Artillery Barrage. If we have the ability to use this, then R1 indicates a range of 1 hex away. I assume the game engine might allow R2 or even R3, though we don't see that in this scenario. Although not directly relevant to this short scenario, The game tells us there is a build rate of only one of these guns per month from our industries. We absolutely do not want to lose many of these, as they cannot be quickly replaced unless we get supplies from overseas. However, the game shows us we currently have 9 of these in a pool of reserves. There are at least a few available to replace losses during this scenario, as long as the unit remains in supply. If we go back to Valencia with the hotkey 1, then select the militia company and its unit organisation, we see the Urabari column. Let's look at that in a little more depth. The Republican army is basically being rebuilt at this stage of the war. There are few professional units available, and many of the units are a collection of volunteers with little military experience and just what equipment they can get their hands on. The typical Republican unit we will encounter in the early part of the war is the militia column. They typically consist of from 5 to 8 components. These usually include 3 to 5 militia companies. Urabari will have 3 under his command. These use a variety of historical names and do not have consistent designations or numbering. Urabari will get 2 components called an agrupación, which just means a group or association of people. Remember, some of these units are anarchists who completely reject bureaucracy, ranks, officers and control from authority, so they did not want to be called by the names of proper military organizations. They will become better organized later in the war, or some will simply disband. Urabari also has a component called a Compañía de Milicia. Although Urabari does not have one, the other name for the companies that was used historically is the Centuria. The Karl Marx column has 3 of these. The name means 100 soldiers, from the Roman name for their units. In War in Spain, many Centuria have a lot more men than that. And we have seen that we can also have a company called Batallón de RI. RI stands for Regimiento de Infantería. So they are a battalion from an infantry regiment, meaning they are professional soldiers. Despite the variety of names, Compañía, Agrupación, Centuria or Battalion, I think it is fair in English to just call all of these companies. But they're definitely not all the exact same strength, and you should keep a close eye on their assault values. The columns are the largest forces we have. There are no regiments, brigades or divisions at this early stage, and there are no corps HQs, just the 2 theatre HQs, one in Valencia and the other in Barcelona. Some columns have an engineer company and some have an artillery battery, though this can be just a few low caliber field guns. A few columns have a cavalry company, and they all have a Compañía de Intendencia. This is a quartermaster, logistics or supply company. The game designates these as type LOG and uses the English word logistics, so I will call them logistics companies. Karl Marx column looks like this: 4 infantry, 1 artillery, 1 engineer and 1 logistics. The Urabari column: 3 infantry, 1 engineer, 1 cavalry and 1 logistics. Note that I will use the word column throughout to refer to all these units to retain that clear idea these are militia and not well organized. Let's be clear that one problem you will have when you are new to the game and are not familiar with Spanish is that the developers have chosen to remain faithful to the historic names. This retains an enormous amount of the flavour of the war, but it can be very confusing. There is one way out of this if you want to take it. Let's look at the only infantry company of the Urabari column currently on the map. This is MAOC, Numero Uno Valencia Compañía de Milicia. MAOC stands for the Anti-Fascist Worker and Peasant Militias. This was a paramilitary organisation set up by the Spanish Communist Party in 1934. From our point of view, there is no clear element in this game where we need to know the political affiliation of the members of this company. All units can be controlled as if they are a single cohesive force. A new feature in the game is that we can change the name of all units. In the window we can say some of the text is yellow. Yellow text means it is clickable. The yellow text indicates we can just click directly on the name of the unit and change it. Removing the MAOC and making this the Primero Valencia Company would be fine. But remember, this is part of the Urabari column. So I am going to put that in the name to help me remember. We already have a Primero or first company, so let's call this one the Segundo or second company. And of course, we will not use the Spanish words, just use the numbers. Let's go back to Mahon and note that the very useful artillery unit we identified is, first of all, not part of any column. You can leave the name alone if you are happy with the Spanish or change it to English. This is entirely up to you. I am fairly happy with the Spanish and know it means the Mahon Artillery Group. But I want to designate this as independent and remind myself that it is not part of any column, so I am going to change it. This is a small detail, but necessary. I think that we should discuss it when there is a lot going on and to get into good habits for naming our units when we have far more on the map. The game lacks good tools to see your order of battle, and you need to help yourself as much as possible. If we go to the Karl Marx Company at Mahon, when we go to the unit organisation, we see that there is a structure for the column. All of the components of the column are indented to show they are subsidiary to the component at the top. In this case, the Carlos Marx Column da Milicia. That component acts as the column headquarters. It actually has a small assault value of its own, but its primary purpose is to coordinate the companies below it. Obviously, there is nothing above this in this window. This is an order of battle indicator only for the components within the column. If we click on the column HQ component, we are taken to its own detail window. It also has a unit organization button, but it shows us exactly the same information. But coming back to its detail window, we can see that we have a button attached to, and this has information next to it. The Karl Marx column is attached to Aragon del Teatro de Operaciones. This is often shortened to DTO, and it refers to the high-level headquarters for a region. So this is the Aragon Theatre of Operations. It can be changed by clicking on the button. I wanted to show that while we lack brigades, divisions, corps, we still have some basic HQ structure, and by default you should find most of the militia columns attached to one of the two army HQs, the Aragon HQ in Barcelona and the Levant HQ in Valencia. While we have the option of the Mahon Comandancia de Naval, this is a naval HQ. Ground units can be attached to it like Marines, but we can ignore that. It will act as the headquarters for all of our naval task forces, and we will return to that in part 2 on naval operations. We should find the Urabari column HQ is already attached to the Levant HQ when it comes on the map. The HQ is already in Valencia. Let's look at that. The city hex is the one just inland rather than Valencia Puerto on the coast. As we already saw, there is a military hospital and a railway unit there, plus the Levant HQ, which has a NATO-style icon with 4 crosses, meaning an army. Let's see its details, and following our general English-centric approach, let's rename it as the Levant Theatre HQ. But the critical information is that the unit has an HQ range of 56 hexes. Units it commands within that range receive bonuses in combat. This is a very wide area and easily covers Ibiza. Our invasion forces attached to this HQ will get the bonuses. But we can improve that bonus in two ways. First, units have a planning target. It's pointless planning for an attack on Valencia. Let's tell the HQ to plan for the invasion landing at San Eulalia. Since it already had a high planning bonus and San Eulalia is not too far away from Valencia, then some of the Valencia bonus is carried forward. That planning bonus will increase each day. And finally, Jesus Velasco is the commander, and his rank is shown as COR, Coronel, which translates to Colonel. Our HQ with the designation of an army cannot be commanded by a colonel. If we click on him, we get a list of commanders who are available. Let's select General Mija at the top of the list, who has better stats. Velasco was a real-life colonel in the Spanish army with a distinguished service record going back to 1894 and served in the wars in Cuba and Morocco. He remained loyal to the Republic when the fascists launched their attempted coup. He was to command forces on the Teruel front and later became commander of the 13th Army Corps. In January 1939, he became military commander of Barcelona just 2 days before the nationalist offensive in Catalonia captured the city. Velasco went over the border into France with other Republicans. The French government arrested them and kept them in internment. Later, after the Germans invaded, the Gestapo sent him to Dachau concentration camp. Velasco died in November 1944. If we go back to the Mahon Independent Artillery Group, then we see it is not attached to anything. Let's change that. Since our primary invasion of Ibiza will come from Valencia, I am designating the Levant HQ as responsible for the invasion. So far as the strategy is concerned, it is essential that the Urabari column is supplemented by this artillery group because Urabari has no artillery of his own yet. The nationalist regular forces defending Ibiza will certainly have artillery. Plus, we already saw they have fortification level 1, and the more time we give them, the greater the possibility they will fortify their position in Ibiza town. We need both artillery and engineers to make sure that there is not a long siege situation. So let's show that. As I said, there are not good tools in the game to see this sort of order of battle. It is disappointing that after 20 years of development, we might still be forced to keep information about our forces in Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, Post-it notes, whatever helps you. Anyway, the Urabari column is shown consisting of 3 infantry companies, but the engineers and cavalry are detached and will not arrive at Valencia until the 30th of August. Instead, the invasion will be reinforced by the bridging engineers and the mixed artillery group from Mahon. Even this small-scale scenario will have many components. As far as possible, we are going to want to bring whole columns together in the same hex and make them operate as a single unit on the map. This will make our job a lot easier in managing the units. That process is called rebuilding a unit. We will look at that further in part 3. For now, our options in Valencia and Mahon give us no columns we can rebuild. The components we have are either static, not yet on the map, or in different hexes. The unit has a button in the bottom left that affects replacements. We want to turn this on. We definitely want to have any losses of guns replaced, and off camera I will go back and do the same for all the units and replace them in rest so they can recover as well as possible for our invasion of Ibiza. We only have a few days. We need to take advantage of that delay. We have now completed our audit of the Republican ground forces available for the invasion of Ibiza. We've decoded the historical naming conventions, analysed the critical range of our 155mm guns, and examined the structure of the typical militia columns at this stage of the war, and begun to work our way around the game interface. Most importantly, we've begun to organise our ragbag militia into a structure that we can actually manage once the shooting starts. The troops are ready in their barracks in Valencia and Mahon, but Ibiza is an island and our success lives or dies on the waves of the Mediterranean. In part 2, we will shift our focus to the sea. We'll look at naval operations, begin to organise the invasion fleets and their supplies, and the warships tasked with protecting them. Only then will we finally press that next turn button and set our plans in motion. Thank you for watching this first part of our guide to War in Spain 1936-39. If you found this helpful, please consider liking the video and leaving a comment. I'd love to hear how you would organise your troops. And don't forget to subscribe to Canny Gaming and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the boat as we launch our naval task forces in the Western Mediterranean in part 2 of this series on War in Spain. I've been Mark, and I'll see you back in the Balearic Islands in part 2.